Get her out of here." Vincent Moreau's command echoed through the cathedral, as 4 armed guards surrounded the curvy woman standing beside his mother's coffin. Before anyone could move, Olivia Carter stepped forward and slapped the most feared Mafia boss in America across the face. Gasps swept through the mourners. Hands reached for concealed weapons. Olivia never flinched. Looking straight into Vincent's eyes, she said, "You don't deserve to bury the woman you never bothered to understand." Then, to everyone's disbelief, Vincent quietly raised his hand and ordered every guard to stand down. The silence that followed was heavier than grief itself. More than 300 mourners filled the grand cathedral, yet not a single person dared whisper. Politicians, judges, business leaders, and members of the Moreau organization all stared at the red mark blooming across Vincent Moreau's cheek. No one had ever humiliated him in public. No one had ever survived doing it. Even his own guards stood frozen, uncertain whether to obey their instincts or the order they had just received. Vincent slowly turned his head back toward the woman. She wasn't trembling. She wasn't trying to escape. She simply stood there, her hands relaxed at her sides, meeting his gaze with quiet disappointment instead of fear. He had expected tears, excuses, perhaps even a desperate apology. Instead, she looked at him as though he were the one who had failed. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice calm enough to unsettle everyone present. "My name is Olivia Carter." "And why were you standing beside my mother's coffin?" "Because Eleanor asked me to." A ripple of confusion spread across the cathedral. Vincent's expression hardened. "My mother never mentioned you." Olivia's eyes softened. "I know. She mentioned you every Friday instead." The answer caught him completely off guard. Every Friday? His mother had spent every Friday at home under private medical care. At least, that was what he had always been told. Before Vincent could speak again, his cousin Damien stepped forward with practiced confidence. "Vincent," he said gently, "this isn't the time to entertain someone seeking attention." Turning politely toward Olivia, he added, "Miss Carter, grief affects people differently. If you've mistaken Mrs. Moreau for someone else, we'll make sure you leave with dignity." Olivia didn't even look at him. "No," she replied quietly. "I never confuse the people who change my life." For the first time since entering the cathedral, Damien's smile faltered. Only for a fraction of a second, Vincent noticed. "What exactly are you saying?" Olivia took a slow breath. "I'm saying your mother wasn't alone during her final months. I'm saying she laughed. She played piano. She told stories. And every single Friday, she waited for a son she believed loved her very much." Vincent frowned. "My mother couldn't play piano anymore." Olivia blinked. "Who told you that?" He didn't answer. Because he couldn't remember. The statement had simply become fact over the years. Olivia continued softly. She wasn't perfect. Sometimes her fingers shook. Sometimes she'd miss half the notes. But she'd always laugh afterward and say, "Music forgives mistakes faster than people do." The words landed somewhere deep inside Vincent. Those didn't sound invented. They sounded remembered. Specific. Personal. Painfully real. He searched Olivia's face for any sign of deception. There was none. Only sadness. The kind of sadness that belonged to someone who had watched another human being prepare to leave the world. "You knew my mother," he said, almost to himself. Olivia nodded. "I knew Eleanor. I just wish she'd had more time with you." The sentence struck harder than the slap. Vincent had spent years believing his mother preferred distance, believing she had withdrawn from him, believing work, illness, and silence had simply become their relationship. Yet this stranger spoke, as though Eleanor had never stopped hoping he would come. Before he could gather another question, the heavy cathedral doors opened. An elderly woman in a modest navy coat hurried inside, carrying a bouquet of white lilies. The moment she saw Olivia, relief spread across her face. "There you are," she said warmly. "I was afraid I'd missed Eleanor's service." She reached Olivia and squeezed her hand, before finally noticing Vincent. "Oh," her smile grew gentle. "You must be Vincent, Eleanor's son. She talked about you every Friday." Vincent felt the ground beneath him shift. Every Friday, the exact same words, from someone who had no reason to lie. He slowly looked from the elderly nurse to Olivia and finally toward Damien. For the first time that morning, doubt entered the mind of the man who trusted documents more than people. And somewhere beneath the weight of grief, a far more dangerous question began to form. Who had been lying to him all these years? No one spoke. The elderly nurse seemed confused by the silence surrounding her simple greeting. She looked from Vincent to Olivia, then back again. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "Did I interrupt something?" Olivia forced a small smile. "No, Margaret. You arrived at exactly the right time." Margaret turned toward the casket and gently placed the white lilies beside Eleanor's photograph. "I promised her I'd bring these." White lilies were always her favorite. Vincent's brows drew together. "They were?" Margaret looked surprised. "You didn't know." The question wasn't cruel. It was innocent, which somehow made it hurt even more. Vincent searched his memory. Growing up, fresh flowers had filled every room of the estate. His mother often arranged them herself. But after his father died, business became his entire world. Board meetings replaced family dinners. Security briefings replaced conversations. Years passed in a blur of contracts, alliances, and responsibilities. Somewhere along the way, he stopped noticing flowers. Margaret smiled wistfully. Every Friday she'd ask whether the lilies had arrived. If they hadn't, Olivia would tease her by bringing daisies instead. Olivia laughed quietly, and she'd pretend to be offended. Margaret chuckled. Then she'd tell you daisies had more personality. Several mourners exchanged puzzled glances. The stories flowed so naturally. There was no hesitation, no rehearsed emotion, only memories. Real memories. Vincent slowly looked toward Olivia. "You were with her every week?" "Almost every week. For 9 months. And no one informed me." Olivia hesitated. "No. I assumed you already knew." Before Vincent could respond, Damien stepped in again. "This has gone far enough." His voice remained calm, almost comforting. "Cousin, today is about honoring Aunt Eleanor, not investigating misunderstandings." He turned politely toward Margaret. "Mrs. Hayes, grief can distort timelines. I'm sure you're remembering another patient." Margaret frowned. "Young man, I've worked in hospice for 38 years. I know exactly who I'm remembering." A few heads turned toward Damien. For the first time that morning, his confidence drew suspicion instead of reassurance. Vincent noticed it too. He spoke without taking his eyes off Olivia. "What hospice?" Olivia answered. "St. Gabriel Hospice Center. I've never heard of it. You weren't supposed to." That answer lingered in the air. Vincent finally looked directly at her. "What does that mean?" Olivia folded her hands together. "It means Eleanor asked everyone there to respect your schedule. She knew how much responsibility you carried. She never wanted you to feel guilty for missing a visit." Vincent's jaw tightened. "I never missed a visit." Olivia's expression remained gentle. "You believe that?" The words weren't accusatory. They were heartbreaking. Margaret reached into her handbag. "I probably shouldn't." Olivia immediately touched her arm. "No." Margaret understood. She nodded and closed the bag again. Vincent caught the exchange. "What was that?" "Nothing." It didn't look like nothing. Olivia met his gaze. There are things your mother trusted me with. I'm not discussing them today. Not while you're burying her. Vincent wasn't accustomed to hearing the word no. People negotiated. They pleaded. They obeyed. Olivia simply refused. Without fear. Without disrespect. Without the slightest concern for his reputation. It unsettled him in ways threats never had. One of his senior advisors leaned closer. "Boss." "The guests are waiting." Vincent glanced toward the congregation. Hundreds of eyes remained fixed on him. The funeral had completely stopped. His mother's farewell had become a mystery no one understood. He took a slow breath. The service continues. His voice returned to its familiar authority. But Miss Carter stays. The announcement triggered another wave of whispers. Damien immediately objected. "Vincent, I said she stays." The tone ended the discussion. Olivia looked genuinely surprised. "I don't need special treatment. This isn't special treatment," Vincent answered quietly. "If my mother knew you, then you belong here." For the first time since arriving, Olivia saw something different in his eyes. Not certainty, not anger, confusion. Raw, painful confusion. It was the expression of a man whose entire understanding of the last year of his mother's life had begun collapsing in less than 10 minutes. The priest gently resumed the ceremony. Prayers filled the cathedral once more. People stood, sat, sang, yet Vincent barely heard any of it. Instead, fragments of conversation echoed through his mind. Every Friday, she played piano. She waited for you. White lilies. Hospice. How many Fridays? How many months? How many chances had he unknowingly lost? After the final blessing, mourners slowly formed a line to pay their respects. Olivia remained near the back, hoping to leave quietly once the crowd thinned. She almost succeeded. "Miss Carter." She stopped. Vincent had crossed the room alone. No guards. No advisors. Only him. Up close, the anger had faded from his face. In its place was something far more difficult to confront. Regret. "I owe you." He paused. "No. I owe my mother." The truth. Olivia looked toward Eleanor's photograph before answering. "You do. Will you tell me everything?" She shook her head. "Not today." "Why not?" "Because today, you're grieving. And grieving people don't hear the truth. They only hear the part that hurts." Vincent lowered his eyes. "When? When you're ready to listen instead of defend yourself." She turned to leave. After a few steps, she stopped without looking back. "One more thing." Vincent waited. "You asked what I wanted." "Yes. I don't want your money. I don't want your influence. I don't want your gratitude." She finally looked over her shoulder. "I only wanted Eleanor to know that she was never alone." With that, Olivia walked toward the cathedral doors. Vincent watched until she disappeared into the afternoon sunlight. For reasons he couldn't explain, losing sight of her felt strangely similar to losing his mother all over again. Behind him, Damien quietly slipped a phone into his pocket. The screen displayed a single, unsent message. "She knows too much." Damien deleted it before anyone could see. Then he smiled. But for the first time in years, his carefully constructed version of the truth had begun to crack. For 3 days, Vincent Moreau couldn't concentrate. Contracts piled, untouched across his desk. 3 alliance meetings ended early. Twice, his chief financial officer had to repeat the same numbers before Vincent realized he hadn't heard a single word. One question drowned out everything else. If Olivia had told the truth, who had been lying? He ordered a complete review of his mother's medical records. Within hours, his legal team returned. The official records show Mrs. Moreau received private home care. Vincent frowned. Only home care. Yes. No outside hospice. No volunteer programs. No music therapy. Everything appeared flawless. Too flawless. He closed the folder. Find the billing records. The attorney hesitated. There aren't any. Vincent slowly looked up. My mother received nearly a year of end-of-life care. Someone paid for it. So where are the invoices? Silence. That afternoon, Vincent drove himself across town. No convoy. No armored SUV. No bodyguards. Just a black sedan parked outside St. Gabriel Hospice Center. The building was smaller than he expected. There were no marble floors. No private security. Only flower beds filled with sunflowers and wind chimes hanging beneath the porch roof. Children laughed somewhere in the garden. It felt peaceful. A volunteer smiled as he entered. "Can I help you? I'm looking for Olivia Carter. She's in the music room." Vincent followed the sound before anyone could announce his arrival. Soft piano notes drifted through the hallway. Not perfect. Not professional. Simply warm. He stopped at the doorway. Olivia sat at an upright piano, while an elderly gentleman beside her struggled through the melody with stiff fingers. "You skipped a note, Harold." "I know. I'm 88. I'm allowed." Olivia laughed. "Fair point." The old man noticed Vincent first. "Well?" "We've got company." Olivia turned. The smile disappeared from her face. "You found me." Vincent nodded. "I did." She closed the piano lid. "Congratulations." "What now?" "I came to apologize." Harold quietly looked between them. "Oh, this should be interesting." Vincent ignored the comment. "I'm sorry." Olivia tilted her head. "You'll need to be more specific." His brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" "I've been insulted by you more than once." The old man suddenly became fascinated by the piano keys, clearly trying not to laugh. Vincent exhaled slowly. "You're right. I accused you of exploiting my mother's funeral. I accused you of lying. And," he hesitated, "I judged you before I knew you." Olivia folded her arms. "Better, but incomplete. What else?" Vincent searched for the answer. Nothing came. She nodded. "Exactly." "You still don't understand." Before he could reply, a little girl of about 7 rushed into the room, carrying a coloring book. "Miss Olivia! I finished the butterfly." Olivia immediately smiled. "Let me see." The child froze after noticing Vincent. She stared at his expensive suit, then whispered loudly, "Is he in trouble?" Harold burst into laughter. Olivia bit her lip. "Why would you think that? He looks like people who are always in trouble." Even Vincent couldn't hide a faint blink of surprise. The little girl looked back at him. "Did you say sorry?" Yes." She considered this. "My mummy says, saying sorry only counts, if you stop doing the mean thing." Olivia smiled without looking at Vincent. "Your mother sounds wise." The child nodded proudly before skipping away. Silence returned. Vincent rubbed the back of his neck. "I suppose I deserved that." "You did." He looked around the room. Photographs covered one wall. Patients smiling, families hugging, volunteers singing, children painting. There were hundreds of faces. Near the center, he saw his mother. Eleanor sat beside Olivia at the piano, both laughing so hard, neither appeared capable of playing another note. Vincent walked closer. His fingertips stopped, just short of touching the frame. "When was this taken?" "About 2 months before she passed." "I've never seen it." "I know." He stared at the photograph for several long moments. His mother looked happy, not simply comfortable. Genuinely joyful. He couldn't remember the last time he'd seen that expression. Maybe 15 years ago. Maybe longer. His voice became almost inaudible. "She smiled like that every Friday." Olivia answered honestly. Most Fridays. What did she talk about? You. Vincent closed his eyes. Always you. She told stories about when you were little. About how you'd secretly rescue injured birds. About the birthday cake you tried to bake when you were 11. He opened his eyes immediately. I never told anyone about that. You didn't. She did. A quiet ache settled inside him. Not because Olivia knew those memories, because his mother had continued sharing them long after he'd stopped creating new ones. I failed her. Olivia shook her head. No, you failed to understand her. That's different. He looked at her. Is it? Very. She stepped closer to the photograph. Eleanor never questioned whether you loved her. She questioned whether you knew how to show it. Those words lingered between them. For the first time, Vincent realized the difference. Love could exist, even when it wasn't expressed. Even when silence made it invisible. He took a slow breath. Can I ask you something? You can. Will you answer? Depends. On what? Whether you're asking because you want the truth, or because you want to feel better. The question stopped him cold. After a long pause, he answered honestly. I don't know. Olivia nodded. That's the most honest thing you've said since we met. She picked up a stack of sheet music. I have patience waiting. This conversation is over. Vincent stepped aside. I'll come back. You probably will. And if you keep refusing to talk to me. She smiled faintly. Then you'll finally experience what your mother felt. He watched her walk down the hallway, greeting every patient by name. Within seconds, she was laughing with an elderly couple. Moments later, she knelt beside a frightened teenager preparing for treatment. She seemed to belong to everyone, yet expected nothing in return. Vincent remained standing alone in the music room. For the first time in decades, the most powerful man in the city realized there was one thing money, influence, and fear could never buy: someone's trust. And somehow, the only woman who had ever slapped him had become the one person whose respect mattered most. Vincent returned the following Monday. This time he wasn't carrying flowers. He remembered what Olivia had done with the last bouquet. She had thanked the delivery driver, then donated every single flower to patients whose families couldn't afford fresh ones. So instead, he arrived empty-handed. The receptionist looked up from her desk. Oh, you're back. I am. Here to apologize again? Vincent gave the smallest nod. And perhaps stay a little longer. She smiled knowingly. Miss Carter said you might. Before he could ask what that meant, Olivia appeared from the hallway, carrying a stack of music folders. She stopped when she saw him. I thought you'd send another apology gift. I considered it. What changed? You. She raised an eyebrow. I remembered you don't like expensive gestures. I prefer honest ones. Vincent nodded. I don't know many of those. I noticed. She studied him for a moment before speaking. We're short 2 volunteers today. If you're serious, you can help. One of Vincent's bodyguards, who had insisted on waiting outside despite being ordered to stay away, nearly choked on his coffee as he watched the Mafia boss answer with one word. How? An hour later, Vincent regretted asking. A little boy pushed a colorful board game across the table. You lose if you land on the dragon. Vincent examined the rules. They seem illogical. The boy shrugged. It's a dragon. It doesn't have to make sense. 10 minutes later, Vincent lost. Badly. The child pumped both fists into the air. I beat the scary businessman. The surrounding patients applauded. Vincent blinked. I wasn't aware this was a competition. It was. You just didn't know. Across the room, Olivia pressed her lips together, trying not to laugh. His second assignment went even worse. An elderly gentleman asked for help assembling a 1,000-piece puzzle. Vincent approached it like a military operation. He separated colors, created organized piles, analyzed edge pieces. After 15 minutes, the old man quietly removed one piece Vincent had forced into the wrong place. My grandson. Sometimes life isn't improved by intimidating the puzzle. Several nearby volunteers burst into laughter. Vincent stared at the crooked section. Noted. By lunchtime, word had spread throughout the hospice. The intimidating man in the tailored black suit wasn't frightening at all. He was simply hopelessly serious. An elderly woman waved him over. "You." Vincent walked to her bedside. "Yes, ma'am." She squinted at him. "Do your parents know you're always frowning?" The room exploded with laughter. Even the nurses covered their mouths. Vincent actually looked confused. "I wasn't aware I frowned that much. You've been frowning for 20 minutes while peeling an orange." He glanced down. She was right. Olivia laughed so suddenly that coffee nearly spilled from her mug. Vincent looked at her. "You're enjoying this. More than I probably should." "I'm beginning to notice a pattern." "What pattern?" "Everyone here enjoys making fun of me." Olivia smiled. "Congratulations. You've finally become part of the community." Over the next several weeks, something remarkable happened. Vincent kept coming back. No reporters knew. No cameras followed. No charitable announcements were made. Every Monday afternoon, the feared Mafia boss quietly volunteered at St. Gabriel Hospice. Sometimes he read novels to patients whose eyesight had faded. Sometimes he pushed wheelchairs through the garden. Sometimes he simply sat beside someone who didn't want to be alone. He discovered that silence inside a hospice felt different from silence in a boardroom. One carried fear, the other carried peace. One afternoon, he found Olivia tuning the old upright piano. "You've improved," she said without looking up. "At apologizing? At listening. I still have a long way to go." "You do." He smiled faintly. "But..." She finally looked at him. "But now you know it." That was progress. Vincent rested one hand on the piano. "My mother loved this place." "She did. Why?" Olivia smiled as her fingers touched the keys. "Because nobody here cared who she'd been. They only cared who she was." Vincent considered that quietly. "In my world, people rarely separate those two things." "I know." She played a soft chord. That's why Eleanor loved escaping it. He hesitated before asking the question that had haunted him for weeks. "Did she ever blame me?" Olivia didn't answer immediately. Instead, she opened the piano bench. Inside were dozens of neatly organized music books. Beneath them, a small wooden box. She rested her hand on the lid. "Your mother left something for you." Vincent's breathing caught. "The letters." She nodded. "I haven't decided whether you're ready." He didn't argue. That surprised her. Instead, he simply asked, "What makes someone ready?" Olivia looked out the window, where several patients were watching butterflies in the garden. When they stop looking for someone to blame and start looking for someone to understand, he absorbed every word. For the first time in his life, he wasn't trying to win an argument. He was trying to become worthy of hearing the answer. Olivia closed the wooden box again. Not today, but soon. Vincent accepted it with a quiet nod. "I'll wait." She smiled. "I know." Neither of them noticed Damien's black sedan parked across the street. From behind darkened windows, he watched Vincent laughing with hospice patients, watched him carrying wheelchairs, watched him smiling. His jaw tightened. For years, he had carefully controlled Vincent through grief, guilt, and isolation. Now, a hospice music therapist was undoing everything. He picked up his phone. "It's time," he said quietly. "If Olivia Carter won't stay silent, we'll make sure nobody believes her." He ended the call. Across the street, Vincent and Olivia continued talking beneath the autumn sunlight, completely unaware that the first real attack against them had already begun. 3 days later, Vincent returned to St. Gabriel Hospice. This time, Olivia was waiting for him. She stood alone in the music room, the small wooden box resting on the piano. "You came." "I said I would." She studied his face. Weeks ago, the man standing before her would have demanded answers. Today, he simply waited. She slid the wooden box toward him. These belonged to Eleanor. Vincent rested both hands on the lid, but didn't open it. "What if I'm still not ready?" Olivia smiled gently. "The fact that you're asking tells me you are." His fingers trembled slightly as he lifted the lid. Inside lay a bundle of handwritten letters, tied together with a faded blue ribbon. Every envelope carried the same careful handwriting. "For my son." Vincent swallowed hard. He opened the first letter. The room fell silent except for the ticking of the old clock. "My dear Vincent, I know people think you've become cold. They only see the man the world created. I still remember the little boy who cried for an injured robin because he thought birds deserved second chances. His vision blurred." He unfolded another letter. "If you're reading this someday, please don't blame yourself for missing time with me. Love isn't measured by perfect attendance. It's measured by the heart that keeps trying." Another letter. Another, and another. To his surprise, none of them contained disappointment. None accused him of neglect. None questioned his love. Instead, one sentence appeared again and again. "I know my son loves me. He just doesn't know how to show it." Vincent pressed one trembling hand against his eyes. Years of restrained emotion collapsed without warning. "I was wrong." His voice cracked. So completely wrong. Olivia quietly remained where she was. She knew this wasn't a moment that needed comfort. It needed space. After several minutes, Vincent finally looked up. "Who kept us apart?" Olivia answered honestly. "I don't know everything, but Eleanor often told me someone cancelled visits. Someone said you were unavailable. Someone intercepted messages." Vincent's expression slowly changed. Sadness gave way to clarity. There was only one person who had controlled every schedule, every phone call, every family arrangement: Damien. A week later, the Moreau Foundation held its annual public memorial honoring Eleanor Moreau. Television cameras filled the ballroom. Business leaders, charity organizations, hospice volunteers, patients' families, everyone gathered to celebrate Eleanor's legacy. Olivia attended only because Vincent had personally invited every member of St. Gabriel Hospice. She wore the same kind of simple black dress she always preferred. No jewelry, no attempt to impress anyone. As the ceremony began, Vincent stepped toward the podium. Before he could speak, Damien interrupted. "I believe there's something the public deserves to know." The room fell silent. Damien smiled with practiced confidence. "My cousin has recently become emotionally vulnerable. Unfortunately, some people know exactly how to exploit grief." A giant screen behind him displayed photographs of Olivia with Eleanor. Murmurs spread through the audience. Damien continued. "Miss Carter claims Mrs. Moreau wrote dozens of personal letters, yet no legal record mentions them. No attorney witnessed them. No family member ever saw them." He looked directly at Olivia. How convenient. Several reporters immediately began taking notes. Microphones turned toward Olivia. "Are the letters authentic? Were you promised money? Did you manipulate a dying woman?" The room buzzed with suspicion. Vincent started forward. Olivia gently touched his arm. "No. Let me." She walked calmly onto the stage. No anger, no panic, no dramatic speech. She simply picked up the microphone. "I won't defend myself." The reporters looked puzzled. Instead, Olivia turned toward the audience. "Would every nurse who cared for Eleanor Moreau please stand?" One chair moved, then another, then another. 7 hospice nurses rose together. Olivia smiled. Did Eleanor spend Fridays with us? Every nurse answered. Yes. Were the letters written over many months? Yes. Did she ever ask for publicity? No. Did she ever ask us to hide them for financial reasons? No. The room grew quiet. Olivia continued. Would the families we've served please stand? If we've ever stayed after our shifts, simply because someone was afraid to die alone. For a moment, nothing happened. Then one elderly man slowly stood. My wife wasn't alone because of Miss Carter. Another woman rose. My father waited every Friday for music therapy. A young mother wiped away tears. She sat with my little boy until sunrise. Then more people stood. 5, 10, 20. Nearly half the ballroom. One by one, they shared memories, small acts of kindness, late-night phone calls, birthday songs, hospital visits, no rehearsed speeches, only gratitude. By the time the last family finished speaking, not a single accusation remained. The reporters lowered their microphones. Damien's confident smile finally disappeared. Vincent stepped toward the podium. The ballroom became completely silent. He looked across the audience before speaking. The greatest mistake of my life was believing strength meant never admitting I was wrong. He paused, then turned toward Olivia. The slap you gave me was the first honest thing anyone had done for me in years. Soft laughter spread across the room. Olivia folded her arms. It was also medically satisfying. The audience erupted with laughter. Even several reporters smiled. Vincent laughed too. I probably deserved a second one. She raised one eyebrow. Don't tempt me. The laughter became louder. For the first time in many years, people weren't afraid of Vincent Moreau. They were simply happy to see him smile. He looked back toward the audience. My mother spent her final months surrounded by people who taught her that compassion is stronger than fear. I intend to honor that lesson. He turned toward Damien. My cousin will no longer represent the Moreau Foundation. Security quietly approached Damien. Unlike the dramatic removals often imagined in Mafia stories, there were no weapons. No shouting. No violence. Only silence. Damien realized the truth had defeated years of manipulation. Without another word, he walked out alone. 6 months later, a former luxury estate overlooking the river reopened with a new name, the Eleanor Moreau Center for Hospice Music Therapy. Instead of private dining rooms, there were music studios. Instead of executive offices, there were family counseling spaces. Instead of marble ballrooms, there were warm gathering rooms filled with pianos and laughter. At the ribbon-cutting ceremony, Vincent handed Olivia a small envelope. Director? She smiled. I'll accept. He looked relieved. But, she continued, I still spend every Friday with ordinary patients. No meetings, no ceremonies, no exceptions. Vincent nodded immediately. I wouldn't ask you to change. Good. Because I wasn't negotiating. He laughed. I've noticed. That Friday afternoon, Vincent entered the hospice, carrying a tin of homemade cookies. Every nurse looked suspicious. One elderly patient accepted a cookie with great caution. She took a bite, chewed thoughtfully, then looked at Olivia. Did he bake these? Olivia nodded. The woman sighed dramatically. I survived cancer. I'm not sure I'll survive this recipe. The room exploded with laughter. Vincent placed one hand over his heart. My cookies aren't that bad. Olivia took another bite, and she pretended to think very carefully. They're terrible. Vincent looked genuinely defeated. But, she smiled warmly, they're made with love. He returned her smile. I had an excellent teacher. From the hallway, Margaret watched them together. She quietly whispered to another nurse. The most feared mafia boss in America spent years trying to control everyone. Until one brave woman taught him the only heart worth conquering was his own. Outside, music drifted through the open windows. Inside, laughter echoed down every hallway. And somewhere, perhaps in a peace beyond words, Eleanor Moreau would finally know that the two people she cared about most had found each other, not through fear, power, or pride, but through truth, forgiveness, and the courage to love before it was too late.